War had returned to the stars. The coalition of Syrinx worlds, powerful alliance of advanced alien species, had declared that the expansion of humanity was a threat to galactic order. They launched a preemptive strike on the outermost human colonies, expecting a swift surrender. Their intelligence reports painted Terrans as resourceful but underdeveloped, a species of scavengers with stubborn hearts and primitive tech. The coalition wanted to crush Earth quickly, with minimal damage and minimal fuss. They were wrong. The humans responded not with diplomacy, but with fire. The colony struck back hard, coordinated, brutal, and unpredictable. The war, which was supposed to last weeks, had now stretched into years. Entire planets burned in its wake. One of those battles unfolded on the dry, sand-swept moon of Thalvaron. It was supposed to be a minor skirmish. Coalition forces landed in full force to break a human outpost, but they found more resistance than expected. Among the chaos of artillery and plasma blasts, one of the human medevac units was caught in the crossfire. The gunship carrying the wounded took a direct hit. Inside that vessel was Dr. Leora Mendez, a combat medic from the Terran Confederacy. I had just stabilized 3 soldiers when the blast tore through the hull. She was found, blood-soaked, but alive, shielding a dying Marine with her body, captured and restrained. Mendez was taken to a coalition field hospital far behind enemy lines. The aliens had no reason to execute her. She was a medic-armed, non-combatant. She even wore the Red Cross, an emblem of the Terran Neutral Medical Corps. The Syrinx believed she was harmless, in fact. They thought they had just acquired a valuable specimen. Human medical science had become a subject of growing concern within the coalition ranks. Battlefield reports mentioned humans surviving injuries that should have been fatal: missing limbs, crushed lungs, deep neurological damage. Worse, humans didn't just survive. They came back stronger, faster, more resistant. Some spoke of human medics capable of field repairing spinal columns with rudimentary tools, regenerating flesh with unknown compounds. So they took Mendez, not as a prisoner of war, but as a subject. The coalition's medical researchers, especially the elite drainary surgeons, were eager to extract knowledge. They wanted to understand what made Terran physiology so resilient and how these so-called combat medics worked miracles under fire. But they underestimated her. From the moment she was locked into that facility, Leora observed everything. Her sharp mind cataloged the way the aliens treated wounds, how their immune systems functioned, and where their medical theories broke down. Despite being unarmed and surrounded, she held on to a quiet, burning sense of duty. They assigned her to assist in their infirmary under supervision, of course. She was ordered to treat injured Syrinx soldiers using their techniques and tools. At first, she complied. Then the results began to change. A Syrinx infantry trooper with critical plasma burns left her table not only stabilized, but regenerating faster than any alien tech could explain. A bruised officer with failing liver function walked out of her care with metabolic efficiency beyond baseline. Her treatments were working, but no one knew how. She said little, worked precisely, rarely slept, and never asked for help. The guards joked about the silent little human doctor, but patients began refusing treatment unless it came from her hands. Others began requesting to be transferred to her caravan, begging. Then came the first strange side effect. A soldier she treated began waking from cryo-sleep early, screaming in a tongue no Syrinx understood: Spanish. Another started showing abnormal emotional responses, laughing, crying, empathizing. Leora wasn't just healing, she was changing them. One by one, the patients who passed through her hands began to feel ... altered. Not visibly. Not in ways they could measure. But something was shifting. Something human was taking root. And still, she said nothing. The Syrinx thought they had captured a passive specimen. What they had really done was introduce a virus into the heart of their machine, not of flesh or software, but of culture, of resilience, of Terran fire. They called her Doc. The guards called her Asset. But soon the wounded would call her something else entirely. A name whispered in fear. A name even death would learn to fear. Mendez. and she had only just begun. Dr. Leora Mendez had spent weeks inside the Coalition medical compound, and by now the facility's administrators were starting to notice a strange shift in behavior among their patients. What began as an effort to use her skills for triage and advanced human medicine had evolved into something far more complex, and alarming. Leora wasn't resisting.
Ow.
She wasn't trying to escape. In fact, her captors noted that she complied with orders precisely, often delivering better results than even their top Syrinx medics. It was almost unsettling how calm she remained, surrounded by species that considered her an enemy. But that calm wasn't weakness. It was control. The turning point came with the Creve incident. Creve was the son of a Syrinx general, arrogant, untouchable, and reckless. He led an unauthorized charge on a Terran forward base and was nearly vaporized. In the counterattack, by the time Coalition soldiers recovered his broken body, he was little more than a smoking husk of organs and barely functioning. Brain matter, their own medical staff deemed him unsalvageable, but politics demanded they try everything. So, almost as a cruel experiment, they handed him to Leora Mendez, expecting her to fail. She didn't. Over the course of 7 relentless hours, Mendez operated with a combination of alien tools, human, field medkits, and sheer ingenuity. She rewired neural pathways with conductive nanogel improvised from nutritional paste. She grafted damaged organ tissue with a self-grown synthetic membrane using recycled dermal cells. When the internal systems began to fail, she shocked them back online with nothing more than defibrillator pads, blood serum adapters, and raw Tyrone adrenaline. When it was over, Creve didn't just survive. He stood. He walked out of that surgical chamber, his body whole, but his mind changed. He never spoke again, not even to his father. He refused to look anyone in the eye. He refused to sleep, guards said. He stared into mirrors for hours, unmoving, as if waiting for something inside himself to blink. Shreve became the first. Of many, from that moment forward, whispers began spreading like wildfire through the facility. The human can heal anything. She brings back the dying but not unchanged. What she gives takes something away. Syrinx soldiers began seeking her out in secret. Some snuck past guards. Others bribed the infirmary staff. Those with wounds too deep for standard medicine came begging. Not because they hoped to survive, but because they'd heard she could make survival possible. And she could. Every time, but each patient who left her care seemed altered in ways no scan could fully explain. A burned pilot regained full movement of a melted limb, lonely to begin having vivid memories of a Terran battlefield he'd never seen. Communications. Officer with a spinal fracture not only walked again, but now understood fragments of English, despite never learning it. Another began compulsively quoting Terran poetry in the dark. They were being healed and reshaped. Mendez wasn't just patching up wounds. She was embedding something deeper: ideas, instincts, human resilience. Call it psychological imprinting. Call it cross-species empathy. Call it medical subversion. She called it hope, and the Coalition feared it. The staff began to crack. One of the medics assigned to observe her had a breakdown, reporting dreams of Earth, despite never having left Syrinx space. Another tried to sabotage her surgical tools, only to be caught whispering her name hours later during a trance-like state. The Coalition's internal logs began marking her patients with a new designation, Mestreed. It became a warning, because the soldiers who returned from her care no longer followed orders blindly. They began asking questions, displaying guilt, showing signs of compassions, something utterly foreign to the strict, duty-bound Syrinx military. Doctrine worse still, they became better fighters. Their reflexes were faster, their endurance longer, their pain tolerance unmatched. One soldier, treated by Mendez after a plasma blast, was shot 3 more times in later engagements and did not go down. He kept fighting, kept moving. His squad mates reported that he seemed impossible to kill, as no one knew how. But everyone began to suspect the truth. Leora Mendez wasn't just healing bodies. She was rebuilding warriors. The medics called it blasphemy. The commanders called it sabotage. but the soldiers. They began calling her Greyhands. It was a whispered name. It's a mix of awe and terror. She wore no armor, carried no weapon. Soldiers from 5 species feared her more than their deadliest enemies, because death, at least, was a known thing. But what Mendez brought back wasn't quite life. By the 3rd month of her captivity, Dr. Leora Mendez had become more myth than prisoner, officially. She remained locked in Medical Bay 6, what the Coalition now referred to as a controlled anomaly zone. Unofficially, the entire sector was under constant surveillance, its logs regularly redacted. Personnel rotated out every 2 weeks due to rising psychological fatigue. The Syrinx command didn't admit it publicly, but the entire facility feared her. What disturbed them most wasn't what she did. It was what her patients became, those treated by Mendez, now tagged across Coalition databases as MZ treated, began to display abnormalities. At first, it was little things. Soldier with a shattered leg, previously listed as terminal, re-entered active duty within 2 days of her treatment, running without a limp. Another returned with a reinforced jaw, stronger than bone, that hadn't been authorized by any Syrinx medical procedure. None of these results were bad per se. In fact, they were impressive, miraculous. But they didn't come without cost. MZ-treated patients suffered from intense nightmares, vivid hallucinations, and heightened emotional responses. Many were reported whispering in their sleep, often in Terran languages. One Vrex soldier, barely healed from an exploded chest cavity, asked his commanding officer what the word resilience meant. He couldn't explain why he knew it or where he had heard it. Another began carving a symbol in old Earth's medical emblem into his armor plates without knowing what it was. Coalition psychologists scrambled to explain it. Cognitive contamination, subconscious imprinting, trauma-induced language bleed. But they all knew the truth. Mendez had left a piece of herself right inside them. Her healing had crossed a line. She wasn't just restoring limbs or regrowing organs, she was doing something deeper, something the aliens couldn't fully track or contain. A mix of medicine, instinct, and raw human will. And the worst part, it worked. These patients became the most durable, battle-hardened fighters in the entire Coalition military. They moved like they didn't care if they lived or died. Beyond fear, beyond exhaustion, one MZ-treated squad fought for 42 hours straight, with no stimulant injections and no medical support, before collapsing. When reinforcements found them, they were bleeding. Unconscious but smiling. One soldier's body was riddled with burns, so severe his own race would have euthanized him on the spot, yet he kept fighting. When they asked why, he simply muttered, "She said I wasn't done." He meant Mendez. They all meant her. The whispering grew louder. Soon, the wounded started requesting to be treated by Mendez. Not because they trusted her, but because they feared dying without her touch. Some even faked injuries just to be sent to Medical Bay 6. Others did far worse. There were reports of soldiers intentionally throwing themselves into the line of fire, believing that to be healed by her would make them unkillable. In a twisted way, they were right. But they also emerged changed. One, a decorated Syrinx sniper, begged to be reassigned after Mendez treated his fractured spine. When pressed, he admitted that he no longer felt comfortable looking at his own kind. "They look ... weak," he said. "I don't want to be them anymore." When he went missing weeks later, command blamed desertion. Rumor said he defected, joined the Terrans across the line. More whispers. The Coalition issued an internal order. Limit contact with the Terran subject. Use her only for catastrophic cases. Avoid prolonged conversation. But it was already too late. She was in their ranks now, not physically, but ideologically. She had infected them with humanity, not the flesh, but the defiance, the persistence, the grit that made humans fight back even when survival seemed statistically impossible to some. She was a savior. To others, she was a corruption. In response, the Syrinx High Command proposed sterilizing the entire facility, a containment event, a purge, but the plan was never approved. Why? because no one knew who leaked a set of anonymous testimonials from MZ-treated soldiers. In them, the warriors spoke of clarity, feeling real for the first time. One said, "She made me alive in a way my own species never could." Another wrote, "I was dead. She didn't just bring me back. She gave me a reason to fight." Fight sealed her place in legend. Now, across the war front, soldiers in hushed tones began saying a new phrase: "If I fall, send me to gray hands." It wasn't supposed to be possible, not from that facility. The Coalition Medical and Containment Complex on Valor 9 was one of the most secure installations in the entire Sarek sector, buried beneath kilometers of reinforced alloy. Guarded by Tier 9 biometric systems. It's patrolled by eye-controlled drones and psionic sentries. And yet, Dr. Leora Mendez vanished from her cell in Medical Bay 6 without harming a single soul, without breaching a single door, without triggering a single alarm, because it wasn't a prison break, it was an exodus. By now, she had spent nearly 4 months behind enemy lines. 4 months healing the Coalition's wounded, reprogramming their physiology and minds with every stitch, graft, and whispered Terran lullaby. She had studied every system, every checkpoint. More importantly, she had built a network not of spies, but of the broken. Patients who had been treated by her. Technicians she had soothed through breakdowns. Guards who had caught themselves pausing outside her room, just to hear her soft, human voice in the silence. They weren't collaborators. They were witnesses. They had seen something in her that terrified them, not because it was cruel or violent, but because it was unshakably calm, unbreakable. When war and bureaucracy tried to crush her, Leora didn't resist like a soldier. She endured like a storm, bunker quiet, immovable, waiting for the fire to pass, and while she waited, she transformed. The battlefield around her. The escape began on Cycle 214 at precisely 04Y hours. The facility's main power grid blinked offline for exactly 6.8 seconds, near impossibility in a site with 4 backup generators. During that window, all biometric locks temporarily reset. Surveillance drones glitched, and every auto turret went into passive standby mode. Nothing exploded, no alarms sounded. But when the lights came back on, chaos bloomed. 40-7 patients in the long-term critical ward stood up from their beds. Their bodies had once been shattered, torn apart by human weapons. Discarded by their own command as beyond saving, but Mendez had rebuilt them, reinforced them, awakened. Them they moved like one being, silent, efficient, terrifying, not berserkers, but survivors, warriors restitched with purpose. They overwhelmed guards without killing, disabled defenses without setting off sensors, and navigated restricted areas as if they'd trained in them for years. At the center of it all walked Leora Mendez. She didn't carry a rifle. She didn't issue orders. Her white field medic uniform, now worn to a dull gray, hung loose over her frame. A battered Terran medkit bounced lightly on her hip. As her creations cleared the path ahead, she moved forward without hesitation. Deliberate, surgical. She never once raised her hand in violence. But no one who tried to stop her succeeded. By the time Coalition reinforcements reached the facility's perimeter, the breach was already complete. A stealth shuttle, its origin still unknown, was recorded leaving Volernine's stratosphere. At sublight speed, inside flight logs later confirmed, were 33 recovered individuals, including Leora herself. What happened to the rest? Some stayed behind, others scattered. Some are said to have walked into enemy lines and surrendered without a word, requesting only a single thing: to see Grey Hands again. The Coalition immediately initiated damage control. They classified the event as a localized psychiatric contagion, blamed a corrupted AI, even accused Terran Black Ops forces of remote hacking. But the truth leaked out in fragments. Wounded soldiers across the galaxy began to receive encrypted messages coordinates. Anyways, the whisper of a rumor. She was out, and she was still healing. Reports of her presence soon emerged from both sides. Of the war on the Terran front lines, a strange figure was seen moving through bombed-out ruins, treating wounded soldiers with terrifying precision. Whole squads that were presumed lost were returned with higher combat efficiency than before, mentally and physically enhanced. But she didn't stay long, never slept in the same place twice, never gave a speech, never claimed credit. On coalition-occupied planets, wounded prisoners reported being treated in the dead of night, mysterious field surgeries performed by an unseen hand, scars sealed with strange patterns turned in origin. Some officers tried to execute. MZ treated troops as potential liabilities. They failed because those soldiers fought with a loyalty not to the coalition, but to her. The Sarek's high command issued a kill-on-sight order for Mendez. But even the bounty hunters hesitated, because by now, she wasn't just a rogue medic. She had become a legend. They said her touch could heal the dead, that she could restart hearts with a whisper, that she never ran, only walked calmly toward the broken. They called her the ghost surgeon, gray-hands, and for those who had faced her scalpel not as an enemy, but as a patient, there was no forgetting, because what she returned from the brink of death was never quite the same. Years passed. The war eventually ended, not with a dramatic final battle or treaty under banners, but with exhaustion. Both the Terran Confederacy and the coalition of Sarek's worlds had bled too long and too hard. Systems changed hands. Planets were scorched beyond recognition. Civilizations fractured. Neither side could claim true victory, and yet among the ruins of peace, her name endured. Leora Mendezor, as she was more commonly known now, Greyhands had disappeared from the official record. No military archive had her final location. The coalition had deleted her from their public systems. Even Terran High Command listed her as missing in action. But she was not forgotten, because across war-torn galaxies, her work remained behind, carved into flesh and memory. Veterans still whispered about her in the corners of field hospitals and burned-out bars. Some had never met her, but claimed to have served alongside someone she'd healed. Their stories always carried a quiet reverence. Mixed with discomfort, she touched my friend's chest once, said a journey commando. His lungs were paced. By morning, he could run 5 miles. But he stopped laughing after that, like something stayed inside him. Another recalled, I lost my arm to a drone mine. I woke up with a new one, grown, not grafted, stronger. But every night since, I dream about her hands working, not as a nightmare, as a prayer. Many of her former patients bore no external signs of change, but something beneath their skin had been rewritten. Resilience, endurance, something. Human and something more. They didn't call it healing. They called it a transformation. Even the Sarek's military, years after the ceasefire, maintained a classified protocol in the event of unidentified battlefield surgeries or anomalous recovery cases. Assume possible exposure to Elman vector. Initiate psychological containment. Observe for behavioral drift. Her presence haunted them, not as a killer, but as a corruption of viral spirit of humanity that didn't burn worlds. It saved them. Terran war memorials never spoke of her directly, but among medics, her story became sacred. Instructors whispered her name during emergency response drills. Some elite corps even painted small gray handprints on their medical kits as a mark of respect to these medics. It was more than a symbol. She was proof that even in the darkest, bloodiest corners of war, the human soul could shine, not with vengeance, but with unyielding compassion sharpened into steel. The last confirmed sighting of Greyhands came 5 years after the war ended. A civilian freighter on the edge of the neutral zone responded to a distress signal from a drifting coalition escape pod. Inside were 3 alien children, wounded, dehydrated, terrified, but they weren't alone. A woman was with them, human, scarred, her hair shorn short, wearing a faded red cross on her sleeve. The freighter's captain later reported she didn't say much, just stabilized the children, handed over medkits modified with unknown compounds, and walked into the dust storms of a nearby moon without waiting for thanks. By the time search parties arrived, she was gone, but the children lived. And in their native tongue, they described her with one word, repeated again and again, Greyhands. Her legend spread far beyond battlefields. On some outer colonies, injured settlers claimed to have been treated by the ghost doctor. Deep space miners told tales of a woman arriving aboard crippled ships, restoring the dying with a glance and vanishing without fuel or credits. Some believed she had died. Others believed she was something else, no more idea than person. Phantom. A force. A guardian angel with blood on her gloves and a vow in her bones. A few whispered that even death itself feared her. That when soldiers reached the brink, it didn't matter which side they fought for if they cried loud enough. If they had the will to live, she might appear, not to rescue them, but to remake them. What made her so terrifying wasn't cruelty, it was her mercy delivered with surgical ruthlessness. She didn't take revenge. She didn't kill her captors. She healed. Again and again. Even those who called her enemy. Even those who hated her. But with every life she saved, she left behind a mark of change that no one could predict and no one could reverse. A piece of Terran resilience. A shadow of humanity. A reminder that the greatest threat to tyrants and warlords might not be bombs or bullets, but a medic with steady hands, a haunted past, and the refusal to let death decide when the story ends. And so long after the wars were over, in the places where bodies bled and souls cracked, her name lingered. Gray Hands is coming. Gray Hands was here. She heals but never forgets. And even now, when wounds open across the stars, the broken still whisper in the dark. Send for the human. Send for her. Because somewhere out there, death still steps aside. For Leora Mendez,